for 3 years. My husband disappeared every Valentine's Day at exactly 7:40 p.m. Not 7:35, not 7:45, always 7:40. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence, because marriage, I had learned, survives better when you don't chase every small discomfort. And yet, some discomforts don't fade. They wait. They grow quietly. And then one day, you realize they have been living inside you all along. The first year it happened, I didn't question it much. Daniel kissed my cheek, grabbed his coat, and said he had forgotten something important. His voice was calm, too calm maybe. But at the time, I was still new to loving him, and new love has a way of making doubt feel almost disloyal. So I let him go. I even smiled. But later that night, as I sat alone at a table meant for two, watching other couples exchange flowers and laughter, something inside me shifted, just slightly, like a picture frame tilting on a wall. The second year, I noticed more, because once your mind learns a pattern, it begins searching for it everywhere. All day he was attentive, gentle, present, and yet, as the clock crept towards 7:40, a strange distance entered his eyes, as if part of him had already left. "Will you be long?" I asked softly. He hesitated, only for a second, but sometimes a second is long enough to reveal everything. "I shouldn't be," he said. And then he was gone again. That night, I barely slept, because questions, once awakened, refused to rest. Where was he going? Why that exact time? And why did it feel less like a plan and more like a ritual? By the third year, silence had become heavier than truth, and I realized something that frightened me far more than his disappearing. I was afraid to ask, because sometimes we sense that an answer might rearrange the entire architecture of our life. That Valentine's morning, I woke with a quiet certainty pressing against my ribs. Tonight, I would follow him, not out of anger, not even out of suspicion, but because the not knowing had started to feel like a slow kind of loneliness, the kind that exists even when you're not alone. All day, I watched him carefully, and yet pretended not to. He moved through the house with familiar ease, humming softly while making coffee, brushing his fingers against my back as he passed. Ordinary gestures, safe gestures, and still, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere inside the man I loved lived a room I had never been allowed to enter. Dinner was quiet. Not uncomfortable, just fragile, like glass that hadn't cracked yet, but might if held too tightly. And when the clock finally whispered toward 7:40, he stood, just as he always did. "I won't be long," he said, the same sentence, the same gentle tone, the same careful avoidance of detail. He kissed my forehead, and something about that kiss felt almost apologetic. I waited exactly 30 seconds before grabbing my coat. My hands trembled. Not violently, but enough to remind me that some lines once crossed cannot be uncrossed. Outside, the February air bit softly at my skin. I watched him get into the car, and then I followed, far enough to remain unseen, close enough that my heart never slowed. The city glowed with Valentine lights, restaurants spilling warmth onto the sidewalks, strangers carrying roses, laughter drifting through half-open doors, and as we passed all of it, a strange thought settled over me. Wherever Daniel was going, it was not toward celebration. 20 minutes later, he turned onto a quieter road, one I didn't recognize. Streetlights thinned. Shops disappeared. Even the air seemed to grow still. And then he pulled into a place that made my breath catch, a cemetery. For a moment, I wondered if I had misunderstood, but no. I watched him step out of the car, reach into the back seat, and lift a bouquet of white lilies. Flowers, of course, just not the kind I had imagined. I followed on foot, my pulse loud in my ears, though the world itself seemed wrapped in silence. And there, beneath the skeletal branches of winter trees, he stopped, at a grave. From where I stood, I could only see the dates carved into the stone. Too young, my mind whispered, before I could stop it. Far too young. Daniel knelt, brushing a thin layer of frost from the marble with a tenderness I had never witnessed before. Not even with me. He spoke. "I'm still trying," he said quietly. "I hope, wherever you are, you understand." His voice broke, not loudly, but in that restrained way grief often chooses after years of practice. I stepped closer without realizing it, until the name became visible. Elena. Beloved fiancé. The word rearranged everything I thought I knew. Suddenly, memories flickered with new meaning. His discomfort whenever I mentioned past relationships, the way he avoided Valentine's traditions, the shadow that sometimes crossed his face for no reason I could name. He hadn't been hiding a betrayal. He had been carrying a ghost. A branch snapped softly beneath my shoe. He turned, and in the space between recognition and reaction, I saw something raw in his expression. Not guilt, not anger, just the fragile terror of a man whose private sorrow had been witnessed. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he said. Later, sitting beside that quiet grave, he told me everything. He didn't look at me when he began speaking, as if the memories were too fragile to survive direct eye contact. "Her name was Elena," he said quietly. And somehow, the softness in his voice told me everything before the story even began. We were young, and certain about a future we believed was guaranteed. He let out a slow breath. Our wedding invitations had already been printed. She kept teasing me about how formal my full name looked beside hers. A faint, broken smile crossed his face, the kind that belongs more to the past than the present. The accident happened 3 weeks later. The wind moved gently between us, and for a moment, neither of us spoke, because some sentences don't end, they echo. "For months," he continued, "I kept reaching for my phone to text her. And every time reality returned, it felt like losing her all over again. I felt something inside me soften then, not jealousy, not fear, but the quiet recognition that the man I loved had once survived the unimaginable. Valentine's Day was supposed to be the day we chose our honeymoon, he said. His voice almost disappeared on the last word. So, I come here because loving you never erased loving her. And losing her never meant my heart stopped having room. When he finally looked at me, there was no secrecy left in his eyes. That night, as we drove home beneath a sky unusually bright with stars, I understood something I wish more people spoke about. We do not marry untouched hearts. We marry stories, losses, former versions of the people beside us. And love, real love, is not about being someone's first chapter. It is about choosing to stay, even after you've read the pages that came before you. So tell me honestly, if you discovered a hidden sorrow inside the person you loved, would you feel threatened by it, or would you hold their hand and step gently into that quiet place with them? I read every comment, and if this story stayed with you, subscribe, because some stories don't just entertain us. They remind us how deeply human love truly is.